Today's webinar is going to be 45 minutes and it's going to be AI pricing, case studies, and teardowns. So this is the sixth and final in a series of 6 webinars. I'm calling it Making Money in Uncertain Times. Basically, it's my way of commenting on AI pricing and packaging. And just for reference here, we've gone through these 5 topics: strategy, concepts, product packaging, AI pricing models, part 1, part 2, around credit systems, and then expansion and adoption strategies. And now we're trying to make everything come together. And I thought that we could do it one or two ways. And there's vastly one that I prefer, which basically say, hey, I think this is what's going on. I think this is what they're doing. And then we can just get started. So this is the way that it gets interactive. And if you have any questions around pricing for AI projects or products, just let me know. So we're going to do an extended Q&A basically for this session. So it's like AI pricing, teardowns, and Q&A. That's all we're going to spend the time on. So actually, no presentation today. If I have a few just like copy paste pricing pages that I just want to show you, and then we can just let's get started from there, right? So, and a lot of you asked, hey, are the other webinars available anywhere? Yeah, so 2 places actually. So it's here, community.pricingsas.com, and then also youtube.com, and then I think the handle is SaaS pricing. There we go. I think those 2 should get you going. So I don't think that the last one is yet up anywhere. So the one that we had last week, but I think at least 4 of them should be up now. So you can just go there. If you want the slides and everything, there's a community page here, community.pricingsas.com. If you just want the recordings, it's the YouTube page. To kick us off, I have a selection of just like screenshots of pricing pages. I have Clay here, Lovable here, Assembly, etc. So we just I'll just kick us off by just looking at Clay to begin with, and then we can just hopefully it'll inspire you to ask questions about another AI company, and we can just look at the pricing of that. So if we look at Clay pricing, we'll just also search them up here. We can see that Clay is one of the companies where we have, they were the pioneers of credit-based pricing. And I think going back, let's say 4, 5, 6 years, whenever I would do pricing for startups, they would say, hey, we want our pricing to be just like HubSpot, because that was, for whatever reason, like an ideal way of pricing. And obviously HubSpot was doing really well. But actually in the last 2 years or so, Clay has taken that role where a lot of companies say, hey, we want to do pricing like Clay. So I just wanted to take a look at how that actually pans out, and then just give here. And I see that Steve and Anna, you've already done Similarweb and Cursor, so I'll get to those in a second, and then we'll just take a look at here. So if we look at what Clay does, they have 5 different packages, so it's a tiered structure. And as we see, as we go down, some of them have more features than others, right? So the custom credits have way more features. I get unlimited rows, 40, I guess that's a lot, action columns per table, AI prompting support, etc. If I only have the pro version, I only get these features and so forth. So the idea is that if I buy a larger tier, I get access to more functionality. Also, what we see with Clay here is that for the free one, they have up to 100 searches for free per month. We are guessing that that's the time frame here. And then of course we can buy additional ones. So we can buy 100 credits per year. So that's what we get. So that's 1,200 credits per year. That's the free version. If I want anything more, so we now get 25,000 or 30,000, I need to do a starter package. I'm assuming, the pricing will go up. And then the idea is that once I have these 36,000 credits, if I want any more, I actually need to go and buy the next tier, right? So this is a specific model where it's both, they have thresholds on how much volume you can buy. So there's a set limit on how much volume you can buy in the starter package. And also there's a limit on the functionality. So this creates the scenario where if you want very advanced functionality, you have to buy a lot of credits. Or if you want a lot of credits but don't want the advanced functionality, you have to buy the advanced functionality. So Clay has basically decided that there is a very strict relationship between large volume and advanced functionality. And they're saying, we're only going to allow customers to buy the two together, lots of credits and lots of functionality. And we're not going to allow the, let's say, edge cases where we have very high volume with low functionality or very low volume with very high functionality. So usually what happens in models like this is that you get a lot of pushback in your sales process. So I would assume that as soon as we get to sort of some of the larger tiers or larger credit volumes, we see a lot of pressure on the Clay sales team to instantly get some discounts or have some, let's say, larger credit volumes at some of the lower functionality tiers. And then I think there's some interesting stuff around how Clay actually executes their pricing, because they also allow to see, we see what can we buy with the credit. That's just what we have here, right? So they have a lot of these sort of versions where I get to actually use my own API keys, and I get to sort of run different sort of versions for things that don't cost credits inside of Clay. And I think that there's this where if you bring your own database, and I think that's basically the problem, where if you bring your own database to Clay, so you don't pay twice for the same leads, and you just use the Clay functionality to just rework the data that you already have, you actually don't pay for it. You just, like, the credits are then sort of not drawn. So I think they have a particular problem around freeloaders, where a lot of companies have started to then look at what Clay can buy sort of with their credits, and then they're trying to sort of put other data sources into Clay, and then Clay actually doesn't get paid. So I think Clay has this problem where they both have a very strong alignment between functionality and volume, which I think creates some friction. And then I think they have this bring your own data source freeloader problem, which I think was really good when they launched it, but it's actually not going to be that good going forward. Also, other comment, we see that the relationship between dollars and credits is a little bit all over the place. So it's like, so you have to sort of divide sort of 24,000 credits per year with like this many dollars per month. So actually there's a lot of mental math that has to go on before the user can even try to determine what the price for a credit is, because first I have to multiply this by 12, and then I have to divide that by 24,000 before I get to a number. Then I have to sort of do it all over again when I want to have a price for something else. So the pricing is not that intuitive actually, and there is actually quite a lot of friction in it. So I think my view on Clay is that they have an awesome product. They have a really awesome product, and the credit model is the right thing to do for them, but it's actually not executed that well. The packaging isn't executed that well. The price per credit isn't executed that well. The free stuff, bring your own data, isn't executed that well. So there's actually a lot of things that I think Clay could do a lot better, especially if they want to monetize their larger accounts. All right, I'll keep it at that. Similarweb. So let's see here. We have web intelligence, packages, and pricing. So we have entrepreneurs, and then we have businesses and enterprise. So the last one basically was, okay, talk to sales. So we'll just do entrepreneurs here. And we'll do web intelligence, and we have shopper intelligence, sales intelligence. Okay, we have a lot of different things here. All right, so let's see. We have annual month. So it's actually not, for what we have here, which is like, I guess, the self-serve price, and then we have the sales-led over here. So for the self-serve price, we have an ACV of around, let's say, 2,000 to sort of 6,000 per year, right? That's essentially where we want to go. So it's like 200 per month times 12 months, that's 2,400, or is this one pays as 1,500 if it's paid here. One thing actually that I noticed is that the annual price is heavily discounted for the per month price. We actually have a 37% discount on the annual versus the month, or versus the single month. So either they have a very heavy churn issue, or their pricing is just wrong. They could just increase this price quite a bit, because usually you want the difference between the annual and the monthly to be to win you overall the customer lifetime value. So for the difference to be this big, the discount to be this big, that means that they would have to counteract a pretty heavy churn issue. So that means that average lifetime would be only like 8 months or so for this kind of discount to make sense. So that's just like the first, and here, it's less than 20% or so. Okay. I get competitive intelligence, SEO intelligence, and ad intelligence. So we actually have some real feature differentiation, and it's pretty clear what I get in some of the larger tiers here for entrepreneurs. Then you can say, is that good or bad? Hopefully they have some ideas about why this is the rank ordering they want to do it with. And then you get more historical data. And each of them is one user. So I wonder actually if they're pricing this per user, which would be, let's see here, it's the one that is included per package. Okay, so I think that's a mistake. So just without knowing what they're going to do, I would assume that the churn issue that they might have, if I look at the annual monthly, could probably be mitigated a little bit if they actually just gave users away for free, right? So usually the more users a product actually has, the stickier it is. Like it's just like if one person uses it and then that person leaves, then the software is going to churn. But if 200 people in an organization use something, then it's just very hard to get rid of because it's just embedded in people's, let's say, work streams and how they solve problems and how they look at things. So I would probably sort of look at whether we actually have a model here where we could give users away for free and just charge per something else. So it could be something like, well, how many websites are you looking at? How many competitors are you trying to have an overview of, for example? How many data points are you gonna search for? So I think that would make a lot more sense for something like this. The other thing I noticed is that we actually have a lot of different types of product: web, app, shopper, sales, stock intelligence. So it also means that I know that they have different verticals and they want to solve for that, but I'm also wondering if they just have a little bit too many products and they're trying to sell the products and not let's say have a pricing model that could capture a little bit more of this in a simpler way. So usually what you see is that companies like this, they will grow, they will add products, they will add products, they will add products, and then they get more and more SKUs, and cross-sells and upsells become more and more difficult. And at some point, they actually have a harder time making sure that every customer has the right product combination that is right for them. And I think that's a little bit what we're seeing here. So there is actually quite a lot of complexity in this page overall as well. So you have 3 plans here, you have business enterprise here, and then it seems to be with a number of different sort of add-ons and modules across, let's say, 5 different sort of product categories. So I think just without knowing Similarweb that well, is that they have a monetization issue with larger accounts. That's usually what you get with product complexity and with these kinds of fixed fee that they're using. And also they have a stickiness issue with small accounts because of their user-based pricing. And essentially there's some monetization friction going on here. All right, I hope this is helpful, guys. And I'm just looking at it. So, okay, let's do cursor. So who threw cursor in here? Anna threw cursor in here. Okay, so we have, let's look at this again, monthly and annually. So monthly is, let's say, 20 for the Pro, 60 for the Pro Plus. Okay, interestingly, actually, the Pro Plus is the same price, and so is the Ultra. It's just the Pro plan that actually shifts and gets more expensive with the monthly one. That's a little bit odd, right? You'd actually think that all of them would have a better deal with an annual plan, or why have an annual plan at all? All right, but they have a free plan, which is basically just not a freemium, it's a 2-week Pro trial. So yeah, I usually like either there's a free plan or it's a trial. Just don't mix the two. And if you actually want to give somebody a trial, like that's actually what they have here. It's this plan that gets the trial, right? So and then they're trying to limit the agent requests, tab completions, etc. So that doesn't seem like a very generous trial, right? So it's like, okay, you get access to the product, you can sort of look at the UI, you can do all these other things, but you can't actually build anything in it. So they are, I think my guess would be that it's not that effective. It might be, but my guess is it's not effective. And then you have sort of Pro Plus and Ultra. You have like agents can do more stuff, unlimited task completions, backward agents, maximum context windows. Then you have the usage. Oh, let's go back here. And then you have more usage here. So I think what you're seeing here is pricing that essentially it caps out like whatever functionality we have actually is already there at Pro. And then whatever we sell them at Pro Plus and Ultra is just more usage. So it's just volume. So the actual feature differentiation is done when we hit Pro. So in a sense, because the hobby is just a free trial, Cursor actually only has one tier. It only has one product from a functionality point of view. Everything else is just volume. It's just you want 3 or 20 times the usage of the Pro, and that's it. And then everything else comes down to either Teams plan or Enterprise, where you then have these other things. And then you have BugBots add-ons, which is then for Pro, Teams, Enterprise. So essentially, this is a very weird way of creating a structure where you essentially have a Pro plan, then you have a Teams plan, then you have an Enterprise plan. You can add usage on top of those, and then you can have a BugBot add-on that then is differentiated in price depending on what kind of other plan you have. So I would say compared to other pricing pages, it's maybe a little bit confusing. The actual feature differentiation between Pro and Teams is here you get centralized billing, analytics, privacy mode controls, org, SML, etc. And then you get sort of more of the same in Enterprise. So essentially what we're doing here, and the way that Cursor is building their packaging is they're saying, well, the larger and more advanced the team, the more functionality you need, and the more these teams are then priced on a per user based model. So I think that I would probably create another model for these guys, which would say, hey, you have the functionality is fine, Pro, Teams, Enterprise. So we actually sort of build them up on org size, but actually users are free. And then I would price them based on the usage and probably use a credit system to do something like this and say, hey, depending on how much volume or code you want to push through, it becomes more expensive. And then that's how you actually run the pricing. And so instead of doing a seat-based model, because, is it really a seat-based model? Here you price per seat, but you also sort of cap the usage, and you try to kind of do it on a 3x or 20x model, but that's not it's also a little arbitrary, like why 3x and why 20x? Like you're going to have all sorts of different usage patterns across all sides of different users. So if you have 10 different users, one might be super heavy user and one might be not heavy, which is exactly what they do in Enterprise. They start to do pooled usage because they have this problem where some is using it a lot and some isn't using it a lot. So I think the right thing for Cursor to do is drop the seats, go credit model that basically prices the usage, and then clean up the packaging around, let's say, team features, org features. I think that would work really well. The BugBot is an okay add-on, and then basically they can for sure also sell priority support and account management as an enterprise feature as well, adding 15 to 20% to the overall account value. So I know Cursor has a lot of success from a pricing. I think it's mostly product driven. From a pricing point of view, they're like medium at best. Okay, so with Claude, we are gonna go full on infrastructure pricing, right? So they have individuals, teams and enterprise, and API. I'm just going to look at the API because that's the link you sent over, Morten. So if you want me to look at the actual sort of user plans and teams and enterprise, let me know, right? So what we have here is that you'll see that a lot of these, OpenAI does the same. So basically they're saying, okay, so we have a model, and to run the model, we need huge data centers that cost actual money. It's actually physics, like electricity, like goes in and out, and we have to move electrons around in the universe in time and space. That's like a real cost. You have to pay us for that. So this is why Sam Altman, I think I quoted that in the first webinar, says the price of intelligence is going to converge on the price of electricity. And this is a little bit what we see here. So now what we see is that the underlying cost structure for something like this is very different compared to whether we do an input on output, because an output means that I need to do something and like say something smart back to you. That's what an output is. What an input just is, I just need to understand what you're sending me. So I just need to structure the data that you're putting into the model. And then we have prompt caching, write and read, again, in and out. So write is an output, a read is an input. So you have these sort of two very different prices. All of that is basically because the models have very, very different underlying costs, whether they're outputting or inputting. And then we're saying, okay, so we have these sort of three different models, Opus, Sonnet, and Haiku, and they just have different price levels. So the interesting thing here is that the Sonnet, which is, I think, is it the latest model or is that the Opus? I actually can't remember. It has a longer, it has a longer pricing table because they're building in some discounts already. So it's like below, they're essentially trying to, you can say, they're saying, okay, for prompts that have a certain length, below or above a certain 200K tokens, we're now going to charge different pricing. So what happens here is it's an issue that I also in my book named metric density, right? So if we have a certain unit of value that we're trying to price, can be a user, or in this case can be a prompt, but then they have very different values across different prompts. So one prompt is not the same value as another prompt because some of them are very big. They have several hundred thousand of tokens. Some have very small volumes of tokens. Suddenly you get into these issues where if you just run the same pricing on across this entire unit, so just do prompts instead of differentiating them between, let's say, large and small prompts, what you see is that the community of customers starts to game the system. So they will say, okay, great, like these prompts are all the same price, so I'll just only send super heavy prompts. And if I can take 5 smaller prompts and just do a little bit of work, and then I can just send one big prompt, then I get much more value out of the system. So it's one of these things where Claude, like many others in this space, are caught between trying to make a simple pricing model where you just charge per prompt, and then hitting these density issues in the model where suddenly customers start to game it, which then means that you, in order to prevent that gaming, you start to add complexity. So I think we're gonna see more and more of this. So essentially, it's one of these where Claude is trying to make something simple. They're trying to make it a little bit value-based, like charging per prompt, but then the infrastructure costs are just hitting them, and maybe also just the realization that like large prompts just carry more value, which is why they're then charging more for it. So I think I'll leave it at that for now. Building an AI-powered B2B software with no one-on-one competitors we're disrupting or replacing. When you start pricing, we believe a fixed plus usage is the right concept. Sure, that sounds about right, except you can do a fixed, you can also do a license, depending a little bit on what it is that your B2B software is doing. So usage would usually mean you give access to the software, so you have a fixed price, that's fine. So you get a little bit of cash up front, and then depending on what they actually do with it, you then might, if they use, get cash at the end, right? You can also just, depending on what the software is and what the value proposition is and how the sales work, just say, hey, you get access and you commit to this much usage, so a license, and just charge all of it up front. And you can, of course, use a credit modality. So they pay you now, and then you subtract and roll over credits, if that makes sense. So I think whenever you are, it sounds like you're starting up something a little bit from scratch. So I'm assuming that this is a sort of company in its early stages. You can try different models. So especially if you have a sales-led motion and customers are worth, let's say, tens of thousands of euros, or not hundreds, but tens of thousands, that means that you can have a little bit of sort of manual handling of each of them. So one version could just be, Martin, to just like try and sell 10 different models or 20 different models to your first 50 customers and kind of see what works best. It's going to be like a lot of manual, bullshit work to manage, but it'll teach you a lot about what the right model is. Then you choose that, cut away everything else, and just scale the model that is now proven to work. I think that would make sense. Steve asks, do you think Clay could make job to be done based packaging work? So let's go back to Clay here. Yeah, so I think what Clay does is basically they do data enrichment, right? So it's like, okay, so you have data enrichment. I think actually the bring your own data sources is pretty simple. So let's say that the first job to be done is, I just want to find leads, and they can say, hey, we'll get you some leads, and here you can do it. And then the next could be something like, we want to enrich leads to a very high degree so we can work with them in a very complex sales process with a lot of depth of knowledge and so forth. And that might actually be something else that you do. And then you can do the enterprise version, which would be, I want to combine a lot of different infrastructure and data sources. I have some of it, you provide some of it. And then I want to combine all of this in a highly automated solution. A lot of it is just pulled out from APIs, and that's sort of the next job to be done. Something like that is actually how I think people are using Clay today, but it's not really reflected that much in the packaging. So it has more to do with, let's say, with how much compute can be executed in each. So it's a little bit still focused on functionality and cost management across the solution, and a little bit less on the actual outcomes for the customers here. So that's my 2 cents really quickly, Steve. Are you talking about improving transparency logic or something else? In the perspective of one job per product package, how do you see Similarweb's products? Okay, go back to that one. Are you talking about improving transparency logic or something else? Well, with Similarweb, let's see, we had them everything, right? So we have relative transparency. The logic might not be that strong because we have this sort of one user, we have, let's say, a threshold on historical data. So I would say that a part of the transparency is gone because of the number of different products they have, right? And so there's just something that usually it's just harder to execute. It's just harder to execute well in a sales process and in an expansion motion when you just have more products and they're just much more functionality focused. So that's it. But I think they could probably do with that, but I think that their per user based pricing for a lot of these things seems inverted. Like so that's usually not that's not how I see the product actually generate value. So I think that's where I would look first. So it would probably be a more sort of fundamental repackaging around some of the jobs to be done, a little bit less focused on the intelligence targets, possibly, and then a better pricing model that would capture sort of volume and the value of data. Can we check out Monday? Yes, Monday.com, and I think actually just pricing. It's very simple sort of tier setup with Monday.com, free, basic, standard, pro, and enterprise. And it's up to 2 seats. So free basically caps you at 2 people working on Monday, and then basic has all the seats you want to buy. Standard then is, and so forth. And here they do a very sort of simple, 1 year is 10 individual months. So it's like $9 or $90, $12 or $120. So that's easy math. So it's easy to compute or think about. And then actually, I think importantly here, if we do 20 seats, what we'll see is that it just doubles. So there's actually no real discount on this. And I think if we hit there, usually they actually used to have clear pricing or disclosed pricing on up to like, I think 200 seats on their pricing page. And so the interesting thing with Monday was that there was actually no volume discount at all. Like 100 seats was just like literally 10 times as expensive as 10 seats. So there was 0 discount. So I think and one of it is actually that a lot of these sort of project management tools like Asana, Monday, Trello, they actually tend to grow in value as more and more people are engaged in them, right? So it has like this inverted function where the network effect of people actually increase the total value to the organization the more of your employees engage in, right? So, but let's see what actually we have in these packages. So we have a number of boards, docs, templates, column types, and so forth. Here we can have free viewers, items, storage, customer support, and a dashboard. And we have some AI credits. Let's see here. All right, we have a credit-based system on top of this. I'll comment on that in a second. Then you get more functionality, more views, Gantt views, calendar views, different user types, automations, integrations, etc. Formulas, time tracking, more views, and private boards. So I've actually been a Monday customer for a while. I think it's fine. It actually makes a lot of sense. I think there is, and it does, let's say, tend to upgrade quite well. So I think actually like Monday.com is one of the ones that have executed this kind of product relatively well. I would say that it's not immediately clear where, what the jobs to be done are. So it feels a little bit like good, better, bestie, like I'll just get more functionality, more views, etc. So that's sort of where we are. The other thing that I would mention around Monday is that they have a lot of what I call thresholds. So they say 5 gigabytes of storage, 250 actions, and 250 actions on integrations, 5 boards, etc. So what happens is, and then create a dashboard that combines 20 boards, is that whenever you have these kinds of numbers that have a certain like limit to them, what happens is that customers tend to always like hit one number first. And then usually, so I hit the number of actions per automation, and then customers are forced to upgrade, but then they're, unhappy because they haven't used all their actions per month yet or created the dashboards that combine 5 boards or whatever it is. So when you have multiple of these numbered thresholds, max 10 users, max 5 dashboards, max 2 templates, whatever it is, it actually tends to create quite a lot of friction because people feel that they're not getting full value because they're forced to upgrade whenever they hit one of these thresholds. And usually what happens is that people hit one first and then not the other ones. So I don't like that a lot. It's a little bit nickel and diming, and it is creating some upgrade friction for Monday, I'm sure. But then they have AI credits here. So let's see if we can find something on that. How does our pricing work? No, that's it. Okay, so we actually don't have anything disclosed on the AI credits. I think that's a little bit of no-no, right? I should be able to like click something and actually sort of understand what the credits do and what they cost, how I can buy them, etc. But that said, what they're going to do here is, I think, the right thing, which is that they're making AI available in the product and they're allowing you to use it for free, like trial AI credits. And then that's just it, right? So they can actually just get you started on it. So okay, the old selling drugs trick, first time is free. The last thing is that they actually have support here as a included like service feature. I think for someone like Monday.com, they could definitely have premium support as an add-on that they sold on the site, and they would just make more money. All right, let's see here. How do you see the challenge of predictability of costs when pricing on volume? So I think predictability comes down to the modality you choose. Are you just charging a flat fee? That's super predictable. But maybe I'm misunderstanding cost. So do you mean the price to the customer or the cost to you when you're doing it? So I'll answer both. So if the predictability of the price that you're charging the customer, then modality is that's your first tool. Like you just charge a flat fee, you can charge a license, you can charge credits. All those are quite predictable. If you charge credits, and especially if you charge usage-based, then you basically want whatever it is that you charge per to be very, very measurable and to be something that customers can track, preferably real time, so they can see how much usage or how many credits they spent. And then also hopefully that they can get some sort of forecast, so they can see, okay, if I used 100 this month, then in a year I'm going to use 1,200. Like so you forecast their usage based on past trends into the future, and then you turn it into money, saying, okay, so you're going to spend 1,200 of the thing, and your plan only pays for 600, so you're going to be hitting your limit in like 4 months, and that means that you have to pay us another $12,000 or whatever the price is, right? So giving people that kind of insight usually helps a lot with price predictability. And the last thing that you give people is controls. So you can say, hey, I want to set a cap on my usage. I want to control who in my organization can spend credits or deploy usage or whatever it is, and do these things. So measurability, predictability, and controls is basically what you do in terms of getting the price when there is challenges around predictability and volumes. Whenever your costs are questioned, you can just use a pure usage basis. It reverses, right? So if you have costs, if you charge per usage or charge per credit, then your costs are covered because they pay for whatever they use. So that is mainly a problem with flat or license-based models. License-based can cap. And then, of course, you have fair usage policies, which are great at also just capping costs whenever you hit those. So usually running into cost walls as a vendor is very preventable in almost all models. You have some where you have unlimited usage on a seat. So usually when the license that you charge per, let's say you charge per seat, isn't really what drives the cost. It's really what that person with the seat does with the software. So it's when you have a disconnect in the model. But if you change that so that the pricing model actually reflects the actual underlying cost structure, then you're good, right? Then it isn't a problem. So it's more in certain types of product setups where the pricing model actually doesn't reflect the underlying cost structure that you need to be careful, but that's where you then use fair usage policies. So I think there's always a solve for it in that way. Yeah, and you specify here a lot of it's priced to customers, especially for expansions, extra credits that are needs based. Yeah, so I think the measurability, predictability, controls. That's how you do it. And I think actually we did a little bit of it in I think the last webinar on expansion and adoption. I think I went through that in a little bit more detail. So go find that video and look it up. I want to point you to community.pricingsas.com. That's where you find the recordings and the slides. And then I want to let you know here that we have a bunch of other webinars coming up every week from now until Christmas. So next week, we're talking about professional services and how to turn it into SaaS offerings, so recurring services. That's going to be awesome. And then we're going to have cost covering and pricing framework logic. So a little bit of that and so forth. So if you follow my LinkedIn or our company LinkedIn, Willingness to Pay, we will let you know constantly and incessantly, so you can't miss it. So yeah, I hope to see you in some of the other webinars. And of course, if you send it to all your friends and share and like and all that, the algorithm will love us. So thank you for all that. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. Bye, guys.